Hey everyone, and welcome back to the Nerdy Multiverse in another breakdown. As today we will be breaking down and giving our initial thoughts on episode 4 of the brand new Marvel series on Disney+. Of course being Daredevil Born Again. Seeing the return of all of our favorite characters from the original series that was on Netflix, and now mixing it into the MCU with a brand new storyline, while still keeping the same dark tones as its predecessor. Anyways though, this episode is titled Sic Semper Systema, which actually translates to thus always over to tyrants, or thus always over to the system. This is clearly in reference to the legal system and how things can be done to go against it. Basically, Matt fighting as a lawyer, and regardless of the court's outcome, others can and have now taken it into their own hands to bring their interpretation of justice. Anyways though, this episode begins as the possessions of Hector Ayala, including the amulet and the costume of the White Tiger, are bagged up in the morgue after he was shot and killed in cold blood at the end of the previous episode. Matt arrives at the morgue to gather these things as they still question who did this to Hector. But before Matt is able to leave, Hector's niece actually shows up. Very emotional, of course. But despite the prediction that she would end up being Ava Ayala, this is actually Angela Del Toro. Again, another holder of the White Tiger mantle from the comics, but with another younger character being introduced who will evidently take up that superhero role eventually. It begs the question whether she will also be a part of the Young Avengers team that has sort of been brewing in the background of the MCU for the past couple of years now, and that is hopefully officially formed by the next big team film. Clearly though, they chose a very talented actress to play Angela Del Toro, as we get a very emotional scene here between her and Matt. The showrunners or directors did say that they were going to initially have the amulet of the White Tiger glow when she went near it here, but decided to cut it out. Obviously to not take away from that emotion, but it does show that her future is already planned out. We then get a couple of shots of the graffiti throughout the city, such as the Kingpin one that we saw being done at the end of the first episode, and the Punisher logo that we saw in the previous episode. We also see one of White Tiger a bit later on, and all of these have the word, or I should say, the name Muse labeled below them. And speaking of Muse, we get a very quick shot of him as he takes his next victim down the train tracks. We then cut to BB Urich and Kingpin's assistant, Daniel, as they drink at the bar. But because of all of the drinking, Daniel accidentally leaks all of Kingpin's plans about the recycling and the port slip out, which obviously leads into an entire article being put out about it by BB. That will in turn damage Fisk's reputation as the city's mayor. Matt then gets a call from Heather about representing a client for stealing a few boxes of cereal, which is the guy that we saw getting arrested by the two cops in the last scene. A very small court case, but one that helps display all of the work that Matt does to help people out. Fisk and Vanessa have yet another couples therapy session with Matt's own girlfriend, Heather. where they finally address this entire Adam situation that we have been hearing about. So turns out Vanessa ended up having an affair and getting with this Adam during the time that Fisk was away. So Fisk leaving was not the only problem in their relationship that they now need to fix. She ends up saying that she got with him because of his hands and the art that he created, which sort of calls back to her love for art museums and the business that she now works in with that. Fisk says that he talked with Adam civilly, but neither of them know where Adam is now. So, with those bloody knuckles that we have been seeing in the past couple of episodes, it is pretty clear that Fisk has seen someone and has not been very civil with them. This entire meeting leads Heather into asking Vanessa whether or not she feels safe in her relationship with Fisk. But she assures Heather that he may be capable of a lot of things, some very extreme, but none of them would ever consist of him doing any sort of harm to her. Which is actually very true, at least for now, as she is one of the only things that he truly cares for. We then cut to see Matt meet with his new client, Leroy, as they discuss the terms of this sentencing and such. He wants a certain thing that Matt just cannot get him because of his past, so he kind of just sits there and argues with Matt and insults him for his disability, which is unfortunate to see and hear, but this also represents things that happen very often in our real world. During their conversation, however, Leroy tries to suggest that a Skrull may have committed the crime that he was arrested for. So it does seem that the public is now aware of the Skrulls that walk amongst them, likely after the events of Secret Invasion, which was an interesting show to say the least. Matt does not get what his client wanted, which wasn't going to happen in the first place, but he ends up getting his client a very shortened time in jail because of his charming demeanor, I guess you could say. But on his way out of the courtroom, he actually runs into Officer Powell once again and accuses him of killing Hector Ayala, which sets Powell off, and he assures Matt that he had nothing to do with it. But it turns out that he is actually telling the truth here, as Matt listens to the sound of his heartbeat to be sure of it, something that we saw him do quite a few times in the original Netflix series. Fisk then meets with his associates at the pier to discuss his plans for Red Hook, which he refers to as the city's black eye. He wishes to come out strong as the mayor, and his plans for Red Hook would really help him do that. Now, this whole Red Hook thing is seeming to be connected to a lot of other things. It's the city's black eye, there are shootings there all the time. Frank Castle has some of the victims of said shootings on his board in his room, and Foggy's death may have even been connected to this as well. Now, I'm not entirely sure where this will all lead, but something is going on behind the scenes when it comes to Red Hook that Wilson Fisk himself may not be aware of. While Fisk is forced to sit and listen to kids sing "We Built This City," his plans for Red Hook are leaked by B.B. Urich, and he goes absolutely berserk when he learns about it. But Daniel owns up to it being his fault, and Fisk surprisingly does not fire him or get rid of him here. But he does say that if he ever messes up like that again, it will be the last thing that he ever does. And hopefully, Daniel does not take that lightly, because when Kingpin says that, he definitely means it. Anyways though, as Matt revisits the spot where Hector was killed, he uses his radar sense to find out where the bullet may have fallen, as it was never recovered from the crime scene. After finding the bullet, he immediately heads underground in an abandoned building to meet with none other than Frank Castle, the Punisher. This is because of his little fanboys, as he calls them, as the bullet that Matt found that was used on Hector has the Punisher's symbol on it, just as the killer's vest did, and just as the cops have tattooed on themselves. This entire thing is getting out of hand. Now, Frank does not get suited up in this episode to take any sort of revenge, but him and Matt have some absolutely incredible dialogue here. Frank presses him for not doing anything about Foggy dying, and Matt accidentally lashes out because of it. Frank also constantly calls him Red here, just like he did in the Netflix show. And he even refers to Dexter as Bullseye. I believe that this is the first time that we actually hear the alias of Bullseye for Poindexter. Frank says that he hears his son every time that he goes out on the streets. And if Matt does not already hear him, soon Matt will hear Foggy's voice as well. So honestly, I would not be surprised if he actually does hear his voice in a few of the episodes that are coming up. This entire conversation of not going out and doing anything to fix these situations or get rid of these bad people is a huge throwback to their rooftop conversation in the Netflix show, when Frank told Matt that he was just one bad day away from becoming just like the Punisher, which nearly did happen when Foggy was killed. Fisk and Vanessa sit down together as they discuss their previous therapy session, the entire Adam situation, and their relationship as a whole, where Fisk ends up saying the iconic line, "When I was a boy." After getting back home to Heather and sleeping for just a bit, Matt wakes back up, clearly stuck on the thought about everything that has happened and what Frank told him. So he decides to head outside into his little safe space on the rooftop where he keeps all of his Daredevil gear as he gets ready to suit back up, as we see him train with his baton and the attachments that are in it. Now, during this sequence, we get to see all of these different helmets that he has for the Daredevil suit. There are 2 red helmets, his newer one, and I believe the one that he wore in the Netflix show, as well as the yellow one from the She-Hulk series, which was also the very first suit that he wore in the comics. But there are also 2 other helmets here. First of which seems to be a sort of white, grayish, or silver looking one. Now, we obviously have not seen him wear this yet in either of the shows, and he hasn't ever really worn a white suit in the comics, other than his suit from the Red Fist saga, when he was known as the Hand of God. And then we have the black helmet, which we have also not seen him wear yet in live action. He has worn 2 black suits in the comics, however. One was the black and red armored suit that he wore after his red suit was destroyed. Although the suit was more dangerous and also assisted him in fighting more dangerous foes, such as Venom, this suit had a lot of negative impacts on his mental health though. So he ended up returning back to his original after some time. The other time that he wore a black suit in the comics was during the Shadowland arc. This is when he took control of the Hand himself and was eventually possessed or corrupted by the Hand's patron demon, the Beast. Sort of like a villain arc for the character. but after he was cleansed of the demon, he switched back to his original suit once more. Anyways though, back to the actual episode, as we also see Kingpin heading into a secluded area as he gets ready to eat in front of a beaten man that he is holding in a cell. And this man is of course Adam. I suppose you could say this episode here is where these two characters begin to return to their roots and are born again. Our final shots of the episode are of the looming threat in the city, Muse, as he begins working on his next victim. Muse in the comics is arguably Daredevil's most gruesome enemy ever. Now, not much is known about his backstory, but he is incredibly terrifying and grotesque. He is a serial killer that uses his victims' bodies as pieces of art. He also has powers in the comics, allowing him to bypass Daredevil's radar sense. But I am unsure whether they will be adapting that part as well in the show. All I know is he's likely going to bring some pretty disturbing scenes for the series. And as he works on his new victim, likely to turn him into another art piece, the episode ends off. And overall, I thought that this was another very good episode. Again, the little court cases and scenes really add to the characters. And it also shows Matt's line of work, the way that it should be displayed. Another episode with little to no action at all, but the dialogue and development really make up for everything. Frank and Matt's encounter in this episode is some of the best dialogue the MCU has seen, and their dynamic being one of the best, now being reintroduced, is absolutely amazing. Things are definitely going to ramp up next episode as our characters seem to be suiting back up. I really enjoyed this one as well, and I think I would give this episode an 8.5 or 9 out of 10. And I cannot wait for episode 5 and 6 next week, as they are bringing us another double episode drop. But yeah, that about does it for this episode, from me at least. But of course, I would like to hear your thoughts on it as well, so make sure to leave them down below. Anyways though, thank you all for watching. If you enjoyed our breakdown and review on this episode, feel free to give it a like. And with that being said, we will see you all the next time that we go through and explore the nerdy multiverse.